Welcome back, everybody. It's been, it's been a crazy week.
Yeah.
So this week,
Yes.
we're deep diving into a pretty wild mix of global events. I mean, from space travel to some pretty big social media showdowns.
Yeah.
And even an unexpected dinner date that I think a lot a lot of people are talking about.
Right. It's a lot to cover.
Get ready, because January 11th, 17th was a week for the books.
It really was.
Yeah.
And it's striking how these seemingly separate events all kind of tie in to these bigger trends that are really shaping our world right now.
Yeah, no, it's true. And that's what makes it so fascinating to
Yeah.
look at all these different things that are happening.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Let's jump in.
let's unpack this.
Yeah.
First up,
Okay.
SpaceX.
Yeah.
Now,
Usually in the news for
they're usually in the news for all this.
groundbreaking
stuff.
achievements.
Yeah, achievements. But this week,
Yeah.
it was for a
It was for a dramatic explosion.
pretty dramatic explosion.
Yes. Their Starship rocket.
So their Starship rocket.
Designed for missions to Mars.
Yeah, the one that's, designed for missions to Mars and beyond and all that stuff.
Right.
Basically.
Disintegrated minutes after liftoff.
That was disintegrated just minutes after liftoff
Yeah.
from their Texas launch site.
Right. Crazy.
Can you imagine being there? I mean,
Wild.
debris just scattered across the sky,
Yeah.
flights getting diverted.
I know there were even delays at
There were even
Miami International Airport.
delays at Miami International Airport.
Wow. Wild.
It was,
Yeah. So
turns out,
it was an oxygen and fuel leak
it was this oxygen and fuel leak.
above the engine,
Above the engine.
creating all this pressure that basically
It's so much pressure.
that it overwhelmed the venting system.
Overwhelmed the venting system.
It's a reminder that even with
Yeah, it really is a reminder that even with
cutting edge technology,
all of this cutting edge technology that we have,
space travel is inherently risky.
space travel is risky.
It's dangerous.
Yeah.
And the Federal Aviation Administration,
And so I guess it makes sense that
FAA,
the FAA
has grounded the Starship.
has grounded Starship
Right.
now.
For now.
Well, they
investigate.
all of this.
Makes you wonder.
It makes you wonder, right? I mean,
What does this setback mean for
what does this setback mean
commercial space travel as a whole?
for commercial space travel as a whole?
Yeah.
Um,
Does it raise questions about
does it raise questions about safety regulations?
safety regulations as more companies
Yeah.
jump into the space race?
More and more companies are jumping into the space race.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly brings those issues to the forefront.
Yeah, it brings all of these issues to the forefront.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Right. And speaking of heated debates,
speaking of heated debates.
let's move from the vastness of space
Yeah.
to the digital world.
The digital world where TikTok
It's facing its own challenges.
is facing its own
Yeah.
challenges. I mean,
Challenges is an understatement.
understatement, I think, is a good word for that.
The Supreme Court just upheld a ban on TikTok in the U.S.,
So the Supreme Court
citing concerns about national security.
just upheld a ban on TikTok here in the U.S.
Right.
Um,
And its Chinese parent company, ByteDance.
citing concerns about national security.
Yeah.
And
It's interesting.
its Chinese parent company, ByteDance.
Right. This decision has sparked a huge controversy
This decision has sparked a
about the balance between free speech and security
huge controversy
in our digital age.
about the balance between free speech and security
Yeah.
in our digital age.
Right.
It's a very complicated issue.
I know. And right in the middle of it all.
Right in the middle of all of this.
TikTok's CEO, Shou Zichu,
TikTok's CEO, Shou Zichu,
released this impassioned video message.
released this, where he's
pretty impassioned video message.
fighting for the free speech rights.
And he's
For this, of the 170 million Americans on TikTok.
fighting for the free speech rights
And highlighting
of over 170 million
the 7 million American businesses that rely on it.
Americans on TikTok.
And their livelihoods.
And he's also highlighting those 7 million
Yeah,
American businesses that rely on TikTok.
it's a big deal.
And he even thanked
Even
former President Trump
He even thanked President Trump
for trying to find a solution.
for trying to find a solution,
Okay.
which is surprising,
Kind of surprising,
considering their past clashes.
considering their past clashes. And
The situation is so tense, and the situation is so tense that
there are rumors swirling.
there are rumors swirling that
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk
Or even Mr. Beast.
Or even Mr. Beast.
Might buy TikTok to keep it alive in the U.S.
Might buy TikTok.
Can you imagine?
To keep it alive here in the U.S.?
TikTok owned by either of them.
I know.
What a plot twist.
Can you imagine TikTok owned by either of them?
Yeah.
Talk about a plot twist.
It would be wild. But seriously.
This ban raises some big questions.
This ban raises some pretty big questions for all of us.
Do you think it's justified?
Do you think
Protect national security?
justified?
Or does it go too far?
To protect national security, or does it
That's the debate.
does it go too far?
Yeah. It's a complex issue with no easy answer.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
While we're on the topic of unlikely pairings.
Yeah.
How about this?
And while we're on the topic of unlikely pairings,
How about this?
a major Democrat donor
Bill Gates,
had a 3-hour dinner with him.
major Democrat donor,
Donald Trump.
had a 3-hour dinner with
Can you believe that?
Donald Trump. I
No.
know so bad.
I was shocked when I read
That
that.
definitely caught my attention.
It was a private post-election dinner,
So it was a private.
where they talked about
election dinner
global health and innovation.
where they talked about global health
Of all things, right? What's fascinating is
Yeah.
that Gates was impressed
Fascinating is that Gates was
by Trump's genuine interest.
impressed by Trump.
Genuine interest in
Yeah,
these issues.
they discussed everything
He discussed everything
from HIV
from HIV
and polio to COVID-19,
and polio to COVID-19.
with Gates urging continued U.S. funding for research.
With Gates urging continued U.S. funding for research.
All right. You know, it's like
And get this.
they found common ground. Trump invited Gates
On something?
to visit Mar-a-Lago? I mean,
I'm really curious to see
I'm
if anything comes from this war.
really
he's been
curious
doing.
to see if anything comes from this unexpected connection.
Could this be the start?
I mean, could this be the start of
A new collaboration?
a new collaboration?
Or just
Yeah,
a fleeting moment of bipartisan cooperation?
a fleeting moment of bipartisan cooperation.
We'll have to see.
I guess only time will tell.
Yeah, for now.
But for now,
Let's shift our focus to a region
let's shift our focus
grappling with
to a region grappling
far more serious matters.
the Middle East.
The Middle East.
Right. There's
Yeah,
finally
absolutely.
a glimmer of hope
There's finally a glimmer of hope
in the devastating conflict between Israel and Hamas.
in this devastating conflict between Israel and Hamas,
To a 3-stage ceasefire.
aiming to pause the war in Gaza.
They've agreed to a 3-stage ceasefire,
Can you picture it?
aiming to pause the war in Gaza.
Celebrations in Gaza.
I mean, can you picture
Cautious optimism from officials,
celebrations in Gaza?
but also the painful reality
Cautious optimism from officials.
of the lives lost,
Yeah.
but also the painful reality
The destruction left behind.
of the lives lost,
Yeah.
and the destruction that's left behind.
It's a complex situation with this deal promising hostage releases.
It's a very
Complex situation. Withdrawal of Israeli troops.
with this deal promising hostage releases.
And crucially,
The delivery of
the delivery of humanitarian aid.
withdrawal of Israeli troops.
You know,
And crucially, the
That's
delivery of humanitarian aid.
it's a big step.
It's not straightforward.
It's not straightforward.
For every Israeli female soldier released, 50 Palestinian prisoners will be freed.
For every Israeli female soldier released, 50 Palestinian prisoners
Those serving life sentences
will be free.
and tragically 2 young children
Those serving life sentences.
from the Bibas family
And
are
tragically,
part of the hostage exchange.
2 young children from the Bibas family.
But there are
Yeah, they're
fears
part of the hostage exchange.
they might not even be alive.
But there are fears they might not even be alive.
The details are
So-
heart-wrenching.
The details are heart-wrenching.
And as discussions begin
And as discussions begin
about a temporary administrative body for Gaza,
about a temporary administrative body for Gaza,
with Palestinian President Abbas
with Palestinian President Abbas stating
he'll assume full responsibility.
he'll assume full
The
responsibility.
path to lasting peace
I mean,
seems long and uncertain.
the path to lasting peace seems long and uncertain.
Yeah, doesn't it?
It really does.
It makes you wonder,
It makes you wonder.
is this ceasefire just a temporary pause?
Is this ceasefire just a temporary pause?
Or can it truly lead to lasting peace in the region?
Can it truly lead to lasting peace in the region?
That's the big question.
It's a question that
And it's a question that deserves careful consideration.
deserves careful consideration.
There are so many factors at play.
Yeah. Yeah.
And while the Middle East faces this critical juncture,
And while the Middle East faces this critical juncture,
there's a whole world of other stories simultaneously.
Of other stories unfolding.
Easy to get caught up.
It's easy to get caught up
in the major headlines.
But
there's so much more happening globally.
But there's
and for you,
there's so much more happening globally.
We like to make sure you're well informed.
And for you, we like to make sure that
in a variety of topics. On a variety of topics.
Let's do a rapid fire round. So let's do a rapid fire round
of some other
key developments.
Other key developments.
Okay. That's good. Sounds good.
Let's start with the economy.
Let's start with the economy.
India. So India
continues to dominate
as the world's fastest growing. Is the world's major economy.
Fastest growing.
Which is great news for India.
Major economy.
Of course.
Which is
that makes you wonder.
Which is great news for India, of course.
About the ripple effects.
But it makes you wonder.
On the global economic landscape.
About the ripple effects on the global economic landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of ripples.
New
H-1B visa rules in the U.S.
New H-1B visa rules here in the U.S.
could significantly impact. The flow of global talent. Right. These visas
are often used
by tech companies
to
hire skilled workers from other countries. So, it's a complex issue. So it's
potential implications
for both U.S. companies.
With potential implications
for
U.S. companies and
seeking opportunities here.
International workers seeking opportunities here.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. And while we're talking about the business world. Elon Musk seems to be making headlines.
For
all the wrong reasons these days. First, the Starship explosion.
First the Starship explosion, and now he's
facing a lawsuit.
From
U.S. market regulators. So it appears the lawsuit is related. To some of his market activities. Potentially raising questions about financial regulations.
About financial regulations and transparency.
Yeah.
It's
a reminder. That even the most successful entrepreneurs aren't above scrutiny. Right. But on a more positive note. J.P. Morgan Chase is reporting record annual profits. Highlighting the resilience of the financial sector. Even though that success stands in stark contrast. To the struggles
of other economies.
The
Indian rupee.
The Indian rupee.
For example.
Just hit a record low.
Against
the U.S. dollar. Right.
It's
a reminder. Of the interconnectedness. Of global markets. And how events in one part of the world. Can have far-reaching consequences. Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of global connections. Iran and Russia
are strengthening their ties.
And
like a new cooperation treaty. So that's a geopolitical development. That's worth watching closely.
Geopolitical development worth watching.
Considering the current tensions.
Especially considering the current tensions.
On the world stage.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up,
I
thought we could share a few intriguing snippets.
That
didn't quite fit.
Into our main categories.
But are definitely
worth mentioning. What do you think? I'm all for a bonus round.
I'm all for a bonus round.
What have you got?
What have I got?
Okay, first up.
The Federal Trade Commission.
Or FTC.
Is raising antitrust concerns.
About
Microsoft's partnership.
With
OpenAI.
The company behind ChatGPT.
It seems they're worried about the potential. For a tech giant like Microsoft.
To dominate the AI landscape.
Right. That's a
valid concern. As artificial intelligence becomes more integrated into our lives.
It's crucial.
It's crucial.
To
consider the ethical.
To consider the
and economic implications.
And economic implications.
And ensure fair competition in the market.
And ensure fair competition in the market. Right. Now for something.
Now for something a bit more lighthearted.
A bit more lighthearted.
Would you believe
that
the U.S.
is
apparently smuggling cars to Africa? What?
I know.
It does sound surprising. Doesn't it? The intricacies of global trade?
The intricacies of global trade
can often be unexpected. To be curious.
I'd be curious.
To learn more about the context.
Behind this, me too.
And on a completely different note. Bill Gates has a new Netflix series. Featuring
Lady Gaga.
And his daughter. Phoebe. It's definitely an unusual combination. And I'm curious to see what they came up with. I wonder if it will delve into technology, or even a bit of music. You know, it'll be interesting to see how those worlds collide. And for our bookworm listeners. James Longman. ABC News Chief International Correspondent. Has a new book out. Called The Inherited Mind. It explores the evolution. Of human thinking. Which sounds fascinating. It's always intriguing. To gain new perspectives. On the human mind. And how we've developed over time.
And lastly, a shout out to Yame from France.
A shout out to just one.
The jury award.
In France.
At the Music Moves Europe Awards.
Who just won.
Congratulations.
The jury award. Of the Music Moves Europe Awards.
So as you can see, even in
congratulations to them.
Just 1 week.
Yeah.
There's this
it's always exciting.
This whirlwind of events.
To see new talent emerging on the music scene. Have to check out their work.
From exploding rockets and
as you can see,
political showdown.
Even in just 1 week.
To economic shifts and emerging musical talent.
There's a whirlwind. Of events happening globally.
A lot to take in.
From exploding rockets and political showdowns to
a lot to take in.
Economic shifts.
Yeah, and it
emerging musical talent.
Really does remind us that
it's a lot to take in.
The world is this
It really is
constantly evolving tapestry.
And it reminds us
with each thread
that the world is a constantly evolving tapestry.
A different story.
With each thread.
A different perspective.
Representing.
Different perspective.
On the deep dive. We want to help you connect the dots.
That's what we aim to do here.
Understand the bigger picture.
On the deep dive.
And gain.
Trying to help you.
A deeper understanding of the events.
Connect the dots.
Shaping our world.
Understand the bigger picture. And gain a deeper understanding.
Of the events.
That we're
all part of something much larger than ourselves.
Right? It's a constant reminder.
And we are all...
With so much happening. It can be easy to feel overwhelmed.
Much larger than ourselves. It is.
And that's why we love bringing you these deep dives.
And with so much happening.
We try to cut through the noise.
It can be easy.
And highlight what's truly important.
To feel overwhelmed.
And hopefully spark some curiosity along the way.
That's why we love bringing you these deep dives.
Absolutely. We want you to walk away from each episode.
Try to cut through the noise.
With not just facts.
And highlight what's truly important.
But also a sense of wonder and maybe even
a few new questions.
Spark some curiosity along the way.
Yeah.
You know?
So, as we wrap up this week's deep dive.
Absolutely.
We want to turn it over to you.
We want you to walk away from each episode.
What stories resonated with you?
With the most this
fact, was there anything that surprised you?
But also a sense of wonder.
Made you think differently.
And maybe even a few new questions. Or left you wanting to learn more.
Right.
Because the world is full of fascinating stories.
As we wrap up.
Waiting to be explored.
This week's deep dive. We want to turn it over to you.
And we're here to help you navigate them.
Right.
So until next time.
What stories resonated with you?
Keep questioning
the most.
And keep diving deep into the world around you.
Was there anything that surprised you, made you think differently?
Yeah.
Or left you wanting to learn more? Because the world is full of fascinating stories waiting to be explored.
Right.
And we're here.
Expert speaker. You're right. It's easy to get caught up in those big headlines.
Yeah.
But there's so much more happening globally. And we'd like to make sure
for you
that you're
we'd like to make sure you're well informed on a variety of topics. So let's do a rapid fire round.
Your rapid fire round.
Some other
key developments this week.
Okay.
Sounds good. Let's start with the economy. So India continues to dominate as
the world's fastest growing major economy. Which is great news for India.
Major economy.
Of course.
Which is
but it makes you wonder.
Great news for India, of course.
About the ripple effects.
But it makes you wonder.
On a global economic landscape.
About the ripple effects on the global economic landscape.
Speaking of ripples. New H-1B visa rules in the U.S.
New H-1B visa rules here in the U.S.
Could significantly impact.
The
flow of global talent. Right. These visas are often used by tech companies.
To
hire skilled workers from other countries.
So
it's a complex issue.
With
potential implications.
For
both U.S. companies and international workers. Seeking opportunities here.
And international workers.
Definitely something to keep an eye on.
Seeking opportunities here. Definitely something to keep an eye on.
And while we're talking about the business world. Elon Musk. Seems to be making headlines for all the wrong reasons these days. First, the Starship explosion. Now he's facing a lawsuit. From U.S. market regulators. It appears the lawsuit is related. To some of his market activity. Potentially raising questions about financial regulations. And transparency. It's a reminder that even the most successful entrepreneurs aren't above scrutiny. Right.
But on a more positive note,
JP Morgan Chase is reporting record annual profits. Highlighting the resilience of the financial sector. Even though that success stands in stark contrast to the struggles of other economies. The Indian rupee, for example, just hit a record low. Against the U.S. dollar.
For example,
it's a reminder of
just hit a record low against the U.S. dollar.
The interconnectedness of global markets.
Yes.
And how events in one part of the world can have far-reaching consequences.
The interconnectedness of global markets.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how events in one part of the world.
And speaking of global connections.
Can have far-reaching consequences.
Iran and Russia.
And speaking of global connections.
Are strengthening their ties with a new cooperation treaty.
Iran and Russia are strengthening their ties with a new cooperation treaty.
That's a geopolitical development. Worth watching closely. Especially considering the current tensions on the world stage. And before we wrap up, I thought we could share a few intriguing snippets.
We could share a few intriguing snippets
that didn't quite fit into our main category.
But
are definitely worth mentioning. Well, what do you think? I'm all for a bonus round. What have you got?
What have I got?
Okay, first up. The Federal Trade Commission. Or FTC.
The Federal Trade Commission, or FTC,
is raising antitrust concern. About Microsoft's partnership with OpenAI. The company behind ChatGPT. It seems they're worried about the potential. For a tech giant like Microsoft. To dominate the AI landscape. That a valid concern is artificial intelligence.
That's a valid concern.
It becomes more and more integrated into our lives.
As artificial intelligence
it's crucial to consider.
becomes more integrated into our lives.
the ethical and economic implications.
Social.
And ensure fair competition in the market.
To consider the ethical and economic implications.
Now for something a bit more lighthearted.
And ensure fair competition in the market.
Would you believe that the U.S. is apparently smuggling cars to Africa?
Now for something a bit more lighthearted.
Why?
Would you believe that the U.S. is apparently smuggling cars to Africa?
It does sound surprising, doesn't it?
I know.
The intricacies of global trade can often be unexpected.
That sounds surprising.
I'd be curious to learn more about the context behind this.
The intricacies of global trade.
And on a completely different note,
can often be unexpected.
Bill Gates has a new Netflix series.
I'd be curious to learn more about the context behind this.
Featuring Lady Gaga and his daughter Phoebe.
And on a completely different note, Bill Gates.
This is definitely an unusual combination.
Has a new Netflix series featuring Lady Gaga.
And I'm curious to see what they came up with.
And his daughter Phoebe. It's,
I wonder if it will delve into...
It's definitely an unusual combination.
Philanthropy, technology, or maybe even a bit of music.
And I'm curious to see what they came up with.
It'll be interesting to see how those worlds collide.
I wonder if it will delve into...
And for our bookworm listeners, James Longman.
Philanthropy, technology, or maybe even a bit of music.
ABC News chief international correspondent has a new book out called The Inherited Mind.
Be interesting to see how those worlds collide.
It explores the evolution of human thinking.
For our bookworm listeners.
Which sounds fascinating.
James Longman.
It's always intriguing to gain new perspectives.
ABC News chief international correspondent.
On the human mind and how we've developed over time.
Has a new book out.
And lastly, a shout out to Yamé from France.
Called The Inherited Mind.
Who just won the jury award at the Music Moves Europe Awards.
It explores the evolution of human thinking.
Congratulations to them.
Which sounds fascinating.
It's always exciting. See new talent emerging on the music scene.
Always intriguing to gain new perspectives on the human mind.
We'll have to check out their work.
And how we've developed over time.
So as you can see.
And lastly, a shout out to Yamé from France, who just won.
Even in just 1 week, there's a whirlwind.
The jury award at the Music Moves Europe Awards.
Of events happening globally.
Congratulations to them.
From exploding rockets and political showdowns.
So as you can see, even in just 1 week.
To economic shifts and emerging musical talent.
There's this whirlwind of events.
There's a lot to take in globally from...
It really is.
Exploding rockets.
And it reminds us that the world...
And in political showdowns.
...is a constantly evolving tapestry.
To economic shifts and emerging musical talent.
With each thread. Representing a different story, a different perspective.
It's a lot to take in.
And that's what we aim to do here.
And it on the deep dive...
really does remind us that...
I want to help you connect the dots.
The world is this.
Understand the bigger picture.
Constantly evolving tapestry.
And gain a deeper understanding of the events shaping our world.
Each thread representing a different story.
Right.
A different perspective.
Yeah. It really is a constant reminder that we're all a part of something much larger than ourselves.
Exactly. And with so much happening, it can be really easy to feel overwhelmed.
It can.
And that's why we love bringing you these deep dives, you know? We try to cut through the noise and highlight what's truly important and hopefully spark some curiosity along the way.
And hopefully spark some curiosity and new ways of thinking about things.
Yeah, absolutely. We want you to walk away from each episode with not just facts, but
about you too.
Also a sense of wonder and maybe even a few new questions.
Yeah, walk away with new questions and new perspectives.
So as we wrap up this week's deep dive, we want to turn it over to you.
Yeah.
What stories resonated with you the most this week?
What really stuck with you?
Was there anything that surprised you or made you think differently or even just left you wanting to learn more?
Yeah.
Because the world is full of fascinating stories waiting to be explored.
It is.
And we're here to help you navigate them.
Absolutely.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the world around you.